Hi, Dave here again, pastor and shade tree theologian, learning my way through the Bible over 51 years of ministry, sitting under the shade tree and drinking some iced tea. And this is kind of part 3 of talking about the Antichrist against the Jewish people. And I wanted to just expand on this just a little bit and let you know just a little bit more information on it. I will also be doing this as we delve into Revelation 13 again, too, on our Saturday night teaching. But I wanted to just do another little short one here on the rise of that. Because some of you ask about Revelation and also about the book of Daniel and how it is that they kind of fold into each other. And so that's kind of why I wanted to do this one. And hopefully this one will just be a little shorty video to do that. So what we have is we have the rise of Antichrist. And Revelation talks about the beast. The beast, the first beast, is the Antichrist. The second beast is going to be the false prophet. The dragon is controlling all of that. The dragon is Satan. Okay, that's kind of the picture that we're getting here. So when we talk about this, with the expanded text of seeing some of these verses, I'm talking about Daniel 7, Daniel 9, Daniel 11, Revelation 13, and also maybe a little bit of Matthew 24. Okay. So what we have in Revelation 13 is the rise of the ruler, the rise of the beast. John says he sees the beast coming out of the sea, right? It's very symbolic on that, right? So when we look at this in the book of Daniel, as we're kind of stepping back, Daniel 7:8 says, "While I was thinking about the horns, there before me was another horn, a little one, which came up among them. This horn had eyes like the eyes of a human being and the mouth that spoke boastfully." This is thought to be, of course, the Antichrist. And as we break it down, when he talks about the little horn, there is a new ruler that is rising among the kingdoms. Do you know how it is that in the political realm that it's like all of a sudden somebody gets out in the forefront of whatever political race is going on and came out of nowhere, and it's like very few people even know who they are or where they came from. And sometimes they refer to it as kind of a grassroots movement. He came up through the grassroots movement, right? This is kind of the picture of the way that the Antichrist will come along. He won't be somebody maybe that most people generally recognized as someone who's coming up through the ranks, and that's why Daniel calls him a little horn, a new ruler rising from among the kingdoms that are already existing. Okay? As he talks about this, and he talks about that he had eyes like a man, this is talking about the intelligence and the awareness. You know, you and I as human beings, we see things. We're aware of things. We're spatially aware. I know that I'm sitting in this chair in my office right now, and you are watching this video maybe from your couch or your living room or from your iPhone or from your iPad or wherever it is that you are, but you are spatially aware of what's going on around you. If somebody knocked on the door right now, I would be aware that they have come and that they knocked on the door. And so in that case, I could tell them to come in, I could let them in or whatever, but we are aware of that. And those of us who can see are aware of our surroundings. We understand, crossing the street. You learned it as a kid. You look both ways before you cross the street. And, I live with 5 grandkids, and, constantly out here on our street in front, when they go out there to play, I'm helping Tredessa and Ryan say, be careful. Now there's a street there, and sometimes the cars aren't always watching, right? Because you want them to be spatially aware. That's kind of the picture here when Daniel talks about that he had the eyes of a man. He's talking about his intelligence. Elsewhere, it talks about the beast coming out of the sea that has 7 heads, right? And it talks about his IQ. He's going to be a very intelligent person. How could he deceive the entire world if he's just some podunk guy from the back hills that comes up, hey, I want to be your world leader, right? He's not going to be that. He's going to be very intelligent. He's going to be very well spoken. He's going to be a scholar. He's going to be a statesman. He's going to be a political connection. He's going to rise to power in this. And so he's going to be intelligent. He's going to be aware, the eyes of a man. And he also has a mouth that spoke boastfully. Now, we know of people that rise to power and they are very intelligent. And there are some of them that are very humble. There are people that have risen to greatness that are extremely humble. I'll give you an example. When we pastored a church in Norfolk, Nebraska, there was Walmart was there. And it was a very small Walmart. And one day, Jeannie and I were actually in the store, and I hung out at Walmart all the time. This was before cell phones. Okay, so I hung out at Walmart so much of the time, Jeannie and I did, and our family and all of that they knew us. And they also knew, because Norfolk was a very small community, only about 22,000 people, they also knew that we were the pastor of the church there, right, one of the churches. And I was the head of the ministerial association, various things. So I was kind of known in the community a little bit. So it was kind of interesting because sometimes I would walk into Walmart and I had to pass the service desk as I came in, because it was sitting right in the middle there next to the cash registers. And I would walk in and the person behind the service desk would say, hey, your wife just called and wants you to call home. Now, this is before cell phones, right? And so I would go over to the service desk and they would let me use the phone, and I would call home. And, she would say, hey, while you're there, pick up such and such or whatever. But that's a funny story, right? This was in the, the latter 80s to the early 90s, but we didn't have cell phones then. And so they knew me enough to do that. Okay, so anyway, so Jeannie and I are in Walmart one day, and because we knew the people, we found out after the fact the story behind what I'm going to tell you at this point. We're in Walmart one day, and we see this cluster of guys and women who are in suits and they're in ties and they're dressed up and all of this, and they're walking around and they got clipboards, right? And they're writing down things. And the manager of the Walmart was there, and a couple of the associate managers was there, and then all of these suits that were there, and they got clipboards and they're writing down. And right in the middle of this bunch of about 5 to 7 people is this guy who has on bib overalls and a baseball type of cap, looks like a John Deere cap type of thing, but he's got on these jean overalls here, and he's talking to all of them. And Jeannie and I looked, and Jeannie goes, that's Sam Walton. And at that point, he was like, I don't remember if he was the richest man in the world or if he was second richest only to Bill Gates at that point. But she says, that's Sam Walton, right? He just looks, if he would have walked in without his entourage with him, without all these people with him with the clipboards writing down all the stuff, most people wouldn't have even known who he was, right? One of the richest men in the world, and there he was in his bib overalls. Now, what he had done was he flew in to the airport there in Norfolk on his private jet But he called ahead to that Walmart because he was specifically coming to visit that Walmart. He was taking a tour around the Midwest of different ones. And he called ahead to that Walmart and he said, I want you to send the employee with the worst car, the crappiest car, to come and pick me up at the airport. And I do not want you to tell anybody about it. And so the manager gets, the guy, and he had like an old beat up pickup truck or whatever, and I suppose all of his entourage rode in, fancy cars or whatever. But Sam Walton told him, the store, the manager, whatever, I want the guy with the crappiest car to come and pick me up at the airport and take me to the store. And that's exactly what happened. And so he brought him in his old beat-up pickup truck, and the richest or the second richest man in the world walks into Walmart in his overalls and his John Deere cap or whatever cap that he was wearing there, and then his entourage follows him in. Now, what's that saying? That's saying that you can have people that are the richest ones in the world, but they have humility and they haven't forgotten where they've come from. And by all accounts, that's the way Sam Walton was while he was alive. This guy, the Antichrist, is not going to be that. He may seem that at first. He may seem like just a just folks type of guy, but then he's going to later on be revealed. And as he is later on revealed, he's going to have arrogance, and he's going to have blasphemy, and he's going to have a boastful mouth, according to Daniel 7:8. Okay? And so he is introduced as a distinct personal ruler at that point. Now, as we look at Revelation 13:1, the dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw the beast coming out of the sea, and it had 10 horns and 7 heads with 10 crowns on its horns. Okay? Now, what does all that mean? When we break it down, the beast from the sea. The sea is portrayed a lot of times in the Bible as kind of political systems. And so you know how it is that the sea has vast waves crashing on the shore, and sometimes it's very rough. It's not always a calm sea. The beast from the sea, he's coming out of chaos. He's coming out of a global political system, according to Revelation. Okay? He has 10 horns, which the horns there are signifying ruling powers or kingdoms. That's the same that Daniel was talking about with the horns there. Because he said that I saw the horns, the kingdoms there, but then out of the horns was a little horn that grew, right? And became great at that point. So the 10 horns are the ruling powers or the kingdoms there, and the crowns signify authority. And that matches what Daniel was saying, that a ruler rising out of a kingdom system is coming forth. Okay? Okay, now, as we look at this, let's go back to Daniel 7 again. Daniel 7:25. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people. He will try to change the set times and the laws. He wants full control over everything. He's going to come in and he's going to obliterate all kinds of different things. He's going to do away with certain laws. He may, if it's around this time, he may come in and do away with separation of church and state. He may overthrow all kinds of different things in the kingdoms and in the governments. But he will be such a charismatic leader that people will fall for it, and they will say, whatever you need to do to bring global peace, you go ahead and do. Whatever toes you got to step on, whoever you got to step on climbing up this ladder, whatever it is. And so Daniel 7 says that he is going to, eventually he's going to speak against the Most High. At first he won't, because he's going to deceive. And he is going to oppress the holy people, which is Israel. And he will try to change set times and laws. This is a picture of doing away with feasts, doing away with Jewish tradition, doing away with Christian traditions, Maybe he will do away with Christmas. He will do with Easter. He will do away with anything that has any semblance of talking about God or Jesus or whatever. We see a smattering of this that goes on in our world right now with the different laws that are passed. You can't put a nativity on the Capitol lawn anymore. We had a big deal, a big controversy here in Colorado about that, about the nativity set that had been at the Civic Center, which is across from the Capitol, for years. And, they finally passed a law. Well, that's not permissible because it's Christian, because it talks about Jesus, because we don't believe in the virgin birth, all that kind of junk. And so they got it removed. And so and there are various things like that. I don't remember if somebody rose up and was able to put it back on there or not. I don't remember on that. But nevertheless, he may change those type of things. And so he's going to change the times. He's going to change the laws. And he is going to direct blasphemy against God, which in our world is becoming more of a norm, because everybody wants to just get along, and so they want to accept anything that comes along as being God or being sovereign or being the Most High or whatever. And so when he directs blasphemy against God, I really don't feel like, with the way that our world is right now, that it will be much of a stretch for him to do that and people to accept him without that. And so so he's going to do that. He's going to oppress the believers, and he's going to try to alter divine order and take those things away. And he may destroy certain churches. He may destroy certain holy days. He may destroy all of those things. And it's not only that he's going to destroy Christianity and he's going to destroy Judaism, but he is going to destroy other religions so that he can bring them under a global canopy of one world religion, basically. And so so that's kind of what it's talking about there. Okay, Daniel 11:36. The king will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will say unheard of things against the God of gods. So this is how it is that he is going to collapse the world religious system. Doesn't matter, again, whether it's Christianity or Judaism or Islam or Taoism or Buddhism or whatever it is. He's going to collapse all of those systems because he's going to try to bring it under one world system. And so he's going to have absolute self-exaltation, claiming supremacy over all religions, and speaking extreme blasphemy. We don't know what exactly that is, but that is what Daniel 11:36 is going to talk about, or that's what it's talking about there. Then when you go to Revelation 13:5 and 6, the beast was given a mouth to utter proud words, there it is again, that arrogance, and blasphemies again. It opened its mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name. And so, again, we have the same boastful speech as in Daniel. The authority is given to him to do that. Now, when Revelation talks about this, and when the Bible talks about this, don't get the idea, we talked about in the last video, that Satan is not omniscient. He is not all-powerful. Don't get the idea that all of a sudden Satan is omniscient, that he's all-powerful and he can do all of these things. God still has him on a very short chain. And as you read in Revelation of even the plagues and the different, the seals, the trumpets, the bowls, all those different things that are poured out, there are certain things that John writes about that certain demons were able to come forth, and they were to kill a third of the population. They didn't wipe everybody out. There was the demons who came forth in some of the judgments that were allowed to, pollute the water, and they were allowed to destroy various things, but they were not allowed to destroy everything. God still has control of that. And in this particular case, when it's talking about the beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and opens his mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name, it's still given only limited authority, only limited power, and only limited power by God. So I don't want you to get the idea that this is unlimited power by the devil, because that's not what the Bible indicates at all. Okay? And the blasphemy that he is going to put forth is central to his identity. Now, when we talk about this, and we're Christians and we were raised in the church, and we talk about blasphemy, we automatically think of swearing or cussing. You know, this goes way beyond that. This is blasphemous talk that you and I have heard from other people that defame God, they defame Jesus, they defame the Holy Spirit. And it's horrible, blasphemous talk. We see it as it comes through our media, comes through our television, our streaming, the internet, all of those type of things. And there's certain blasphemies that we as Christians, we think, how in the world can somebody say that? But the limits are off, you know. The decency has gone. And we see so much of it already that we can imagine that when the Antichrist, this beast, rises, that he will speak blasphemous words. But here's the thing. A great deal of the people will still just accept him as a global leader. Well, we're going to overlook his faults because he's going to bring global peace. Right? And that's what it's talking about. This ruler openly opposes and elevates himself above God. And he wants everybody to fall down and to worship him. Now, let's go back to Daniel 9 again, the deception phase of the covenant. He will confirm a covenant with many of the 1-7, which we talked about, the 7 years. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to the sacrifice and the offering. So 3.5 years in is the abomination of desolation. And whatever it is that he's going to do, he's going to probably set up an image. It's going to have blasphemous names on it, and he is going to be worshipped. So he begins with the agreement of peace and alliance with Israel and with many others. And he appears to be very cooperative before turning. But then Revelation 13:3-4 comes along. It says, the whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. The entire world is deceived by this. Not just the Jewish people, but the entire world is deceived by that. Now, of course, there's going to be remnants of people that are not deceived, because after the rapture, the Bibles are still going to be laying around. The Christian television is still going to be here on the internet, still going to be recorded. There's going to be all of those type of things, and there's going to be people that are going to be watching this, and they're going to know that this is the Antichrist, that this is the beast. These are the ones that will come to saving knowledge of Jesus later on in the Great Tribulation, but then they're going to have to be martyred. They're going to have to be killed, because the beast or the Antichrist is not going to put up with it. You say, how can this be? I can tell you how it can be, because all we have to do is look back at 2020. We had a global pandemic, and there were edicts and there were laws, and there was some martial law that was invoked in certain areas there. And guess what? We all went along with it. In 2020, they said that churches couldn't meet. And so what happened? Pastors had to do their sermons with just a few people in the church who were wearing masks, and they recorded it, and they sent it out, and everybody sat at home and watched it. And many, many churches were destroyed and had to close their doors because of 2020, because of those edicts that were put out by the government. Many, many small businesses had to close their doors and were destroyed because people were not allowed to go into those restaurants or into those businesses and buy anything. And you and I remember this in 2020, and I remember going to Home Depot, and I remember going to certain stores, and they marked off 6 feet so that when you went in, they would only, first of all, allow a certain number of people in the store at the same time, and you had to stand outside, and you stood 6 feet apart wearing your mask at that, right? It was one of the most ridiculous times that had ever been on Earth. And so much of it was later on shown to be not true, untrue. You can agree or not, but at least we can maybe agree that it was a crazy, weird, stupid time, and you can think of all kinds of other adjectives and adverbs to describe it. But what's my point? My point is that the whole world followed that. We had a global pandemic. There were very few little pockets in the world that did not follow that mandate and all of the things of wearing masks and all of that. So you can see how it is that in Revelation 13 that it says the whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. It's easy to see. How is it that you could take a country like Germany back in the 1930s and 40s and have the great majority of the people who followed Adolf Hitler in trying to exterminate the Jews and also conquer the world? It's the same thing. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. And people worshiped the dragon. They worshiped Satan. They worshiped evil. And they just accepted it. And they also worshiped the beast and asked, who is like the beast? And it goes on and says, who can come against the beast? Who can conquer the beast? Right? Now, they may not call him the beast. They may call him, Joe Blow or John Smith or whoever his name is. But they're going to say, man, this guy, and remember, it is a guy, it's not a woman, this guy can do no wrong. This guy is going to bring gas prices down. He's going to bring food prices down. And he's going to do all of these wonderful things for the environment. And we're not going to have global warming anymore because of this guy. And we are all going to be able to come together and worship together. And all of these things are going to be set up. And then 3.5 years through the tribulation, he's going to turn. And Israel's going to understand that he is not the Messiah. But before that, he's going to have global admiration. He's going to have global acceptance. This is before the persecution comes about. And he's going to have worship before the deception. Now, think about this for just a moment, and let's go back to Adolf Hitler again. He had command of hundreds of thousands of people, right? And when he began to bring in, and his henchmen began to bring in the locking up of the Jews and putting them into the ghettos and taking all of their material possessions away, people would follow that because they thought that the Jews were a threat to their livelihood and to their society. And they began to follow that, and when it began to progress, and then he said, not only do we need to put them in ghettos, but we need to put them in camps. And then in those camps, we need to perform certain experiments on them. And ultimately, we are deeming that they are subhuman, and we need to exterminate them. And most of the German people went along with it. There's that scene, Band of Brothers, those who know me, I watch Band of Brothers at least once a year, every year. I love that series. And there's that scene in there at the very last when they discover these camps that as we as the U.S. military moved in to conquer Germany and all, that right outside one of these German towns was one of these death camps that they had put, the Polish people in, some of the Russian people in, and the Jews and all of that. And they'd put them in that, and they were exterminating them, and they had the ovens going, and they were burning them alive and everything. And the people in town, they either knew about it or they looked the other way. And it's a very graphic scene in that series, if you haven't seen it, how the military went back into the German town and loaded up all of the civilians that were in the German town to come out into the camp and to take care of all of these bodies, these thousands and thousands of bodies that were piled up in this camp, because they said, if you didn't know about it, you should have known about it. And if you did know about it, you just turned away and you didn't pay any attention to it. And so it was a very powerful scene in there that one of the ladies who is dressed in her finery and all of that has had a previous run-in with one of the officers. She's out there and she's helping to carry these bodies and stuff. And that officer walks by and looks at her like, you knew what was going on, right? So we see that type of thing. We saw that type of thing. And during the pandemic, we all had to yield to that. And then we look at this person who rises, the Antichrist, the beast, global admiration, global acceptance, and all of a sudden global worship. This guy's going to save us from all that's bad. And I can see exactly how it is that people can be deceived, because we've been there. From our experience, we have already been there in history. And those who do not heed history are doomed to repeat it, as Santayana said. He doesn't start out as a tyrant, this beast, this Antichrist, but he starts to get admired, and then all of a sudden he's going to turn. And when he turns, and he turns on the Jewish people, and he turns on a certain group, the world is going to go along with him in the same way that the world went along with the Nazis. Something to think about. Daniel 9:27 then goes into the turning point, or the abomination of desolation. As I said, I'm going to do another video on that, so I won't go heavy into this. In the middle of the seven, Daniel says, Daniel 9, he will put an end to the sacrifice and the offering. He's going to turn on the Jewish people. There's a sudden shift. And he ends proper worship so that he can set himself up as the image to be worshipped. Daniel 11:31 says his armed forces will rise up to desecrate the temple fortress and will abolish the daily sacrifice. Then they will set up the abomination that causes desolation. By the way, the last couple of videos that I've been doing, this is a New International Version that I'm using of the Bible, so it's not King James that I'm quoting here. It's not Berean Standard Bible or anything. It's New International at this point, but all the translations are very similar in this. So his armed forces will rise up to desecrate the temple fortress and will abolish the daily sacrifice, and they will set up the abomination that causes desolation. And this is where it's thought to be some type of an image or something like that. God throughout the entire Bible is not big on idols. He constantly was telling his people to go in and the Ashereth poles and the idols and all of the different pagan altars and all the things that they sacrificed babies on, and they sacrificed other humans on, and they did horrible things. God constantly told the children of Israel, when you go into the promised land, you're to destroy all of this stuff. And this is what is being set up at this point. And so the temple is going to be defiled. The sacrifices to Jehovah are going to be stopped. And he's going to set up the abomination of desolation and false worship. Now, as it goes on in Revelation 13, 14 and 15, it ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image, so that the image could speak and cause all who refuse to worship the image to be killed. There's some type of animatronics or something that's going to go on with this image that he sets up, that people are going to be deceived and think that this thing is actually talking to them. Whether that is some type of a product of an AI-driven type of a thing, or whatever it is, we don't know at this point. But it could be a variety of different things. But whatever this image is, it's being set up. And the second beast, which is the false prophet, we haven't talked a lot about him yet, was given power to give breath to this image. It was like a seemingly, because Satan doesn't create. He can't create. So it's seemingly he gives breath to this image so that the image could speak and cause all that refuse to worship to be killed. And this is where the martyrs come in. Okay? So the image of the beast is established. The worship becomes mandatory. You say, well, I won't bow down and worship. Well, you may. Just like you said, well, I'm not going to wear a mask. I'm not going to stay 6 feet apart. You may. If you want to go in the grocery store and you want to buy anything, you put on your mask and you stand 6 feet apart and you wait until the other 24 people that were in there come back out. Okay? Refusal, in this case, leads to death. It didn't, thankfully, in 2020. I think there were people got locked up, though. This refusal leads to death. And so this is the full picture of that abomination of desolation. We'll talk about that later. False worship replaces true worship, enforced globally, and that comes in. Now, as we move on, and I'll be done with this one in just a little bit here. Revelation 13, satanic empowerment. The dragon, or Satan, gave the beast his power and his throne and his great authority. So this is Revelation 13:2. I will talk about this more on my Saturday night teaching, but I wanted to go more in depth on that there. And so the source of his power is from Satan. It's satanic, the dragon. When we talk about the Antichrist, he is more of a political, social figure. Talk about the false prophet, he is more of a spiritual leader. But they are both directed by Satan. Not just a man, but they are empowered by Satan. And as that moves in there, then we go into the persecution of God's people. Daniel 7:25. And he oppresses the holy people. Daniel 11:33. Those who are wise will instruct many, though for a time they will fall by the sword and be burned and captured and plundered. This is the prophecy of Daniel about the end times of what's coming in. And the faithful believers are going to suffer, and we're going to have the martyrs. It's where the 144,000 are martyred. This is where the multitudes are martyred. They're murdered and martyred in that. And a lot of them, their heads are cut off. Some of you remember Chick tracts. I used to have those when we were a kid. They were tracts, that would show you the way of the gospel, and they were little cartoon tracts. They were kind of like a forerunner to graphic novels, except they were very small or whatever. And I can remember that they did a lot of the end time stuff and Revelation and various things. And I can always remember that the authorities that were there rode around on 3-wheel motorcycles with guillotines mounted on the back, so that they could capture the Christians or the Jews or whatever that would not bow down to the beast, and they would execute them by cutting off their heads on the back of these motorcycles. So that was one person's rendition and thought of that. Revelation 13:7, it was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And so direct violent persecution on a global scale. And the consistent message was, after the deception comes the persecution. So we want to keep that in mind. Then we've got global dominion. Daniel 7:23. The fourth beast is a fourth kingdom. It will devour the whole earth, trampling it down. Global domination. Revelation 13:7-8. It was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. This is the beast. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast. So worldwide political power, worldwide religious control. It's not just regional, but it's worldwide. Then we move into the limited time and the final judgment. Daniel 7:26. But the court will sit, and his power will be taken away and completely destroyed forever. This is where you and I win in the end. Now, first of all, we're not going to go through all of this stuff because we're going to be raptured. We're going to be out of here. But this is where God ends. You know, some preacher one time, he coined the phrase, I read the back of the book and we win, right? This is what it's talking about here. So Daniel 7:26, even in the book of Daniel, prophesying this. Daniel 9:27, until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. That judgment is going to be poured out. Revelation 13:5, and to exercise its authority for 42 months. He goes, and then he's going to be destroyed. And we'll talk about that more as we get to the latter parts of Revelation. And so what is this saying? It's saying that Satan's time is limited, and he knows that it's limited. That's why it was that he tried to destroy the Jewish people all through the Old Testament and the New Testament. That's why in the New Testament, when Christ comes and we receive Christ, that's why he's tried to destroy the Christians from the first century on. And that's why he wants to decimate all of that, because he knows that his time is limited. God has already decreed his end and his final judgment. Okay? So he rises, he rules briefly, and he's ultimately destroyed by God. And that is kind of what we're talking about here. Now, let me just recap this real quick, and then we're going to be done. So, if you go back and you study Daniel 7, Revelation 13, this is he rises from the nations. Then, according to Daniel 7 and Daniel 11 and Revelation 13, he speaks the blasphemy. Then, according to Daniel 9, he deceives through peace and covenant. Daniel 9 and 11, he breaks covenant and desecrates the temple. Daniel 11 and Revelation 13, he sets up the false worship, and this is when the abomination takes place. Revelation 13 says that he is empowered by Satan. Daniel 7 and 11 and Revelation 13 says that he's going to persecute the believers. Now remember, this is happening during the tribulation. People are still getting saved during the tribulation. Daniel 7 and Revelation 13, he rules globally for a short time. And then Daniel 7, he is destroyed by God, and we will also see this later on in Revelation, around 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, all of that. So the Antichrist, or the beast, is going to rise through deception. He exalts himself as God. He desecrates true worship. He demands global allegiance. He persecutes the faithful, and is ultimately destroyed by divine judgment. And that's where we are on this one. So, the takeaway, you and I win. God wins. God is not slack in what he is going to do with this whole situation. And that gives us hope. We are on the winning side. We're on the winning team if we know Jesus Christ as our Savior. And that's the hope, and that's the great thing about that. Now, I've got more things to tell you about, but for right now, that is the third part to this, so I will see you next time.